Hi, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the unofficial companion podcast to HBO Max's hit show, Industry. I'm Jen.
I'm Kristen.
And we are the Wall Street Skinny, two lifelong friends, former investment bankers, and teachers who are here to break down everything in your favorite show, from the finance to the romance, and to give you the skinny on what's real and what's Hollywood. So we are back, baby. This is season 2, episode 1. I felt after watching this show or this episode that my faith in the show had been restored. However, the episode is called Daddy. Not my favorite title. It feels like a daddy's home nod immediately out of the gates to Eric being back. There's way more to it than just that, it turns out. But of course, this originally aired in August of 2022. But for anyone watching now, it feels kind of eerie because we're in the immediate weeks following the US presidential election. And that phrase, daddy's home, was used in reference to Trump's election campaign here in the US. So that's all I could think of. Yes.
I didn't even realize that. Okay.
Yeah. Right now, again, for those of you who are listening in the year like 2034 or whatever it is, there was like a hashtag daddy's home element to Trump's reelection campaign. God. So yeah, but I'll let you kick us off, Kristen. I do want to say though that it starts with a montage, and with the synth 80s music that we have for this show, which I know is not your favorite. It's not my favorite either, but man, I love a montage and I love me some synth 80s music. So like, I just already the vibes are better out of the gates. I'm super positive on this episode. So why don't you get us started with our recap?
Awesome. All right. So I do want to give a quick disclaimer. I just took a COVID test. It was negative, but I feel like I'm on death's door. So if my energy is a little bit lower than normal, you know why. I'm going to do my best because we really are excited with this. This episode is great. But yeah. So anyway, so to your point, show opens and we have a montage of all of our favorite characters. So we have Harper diving into a pool. Apparently she's a swimmer now. Yaz is walking onto the trading floor. She kind of is like a little bit more of like pep in her step. She seems a little more confident. We see Robert brushing his teeth. We still don't know if he got the job yet. And Harper then looks like she's on this like headset. So she's clearly working from home. She's got multiple Bloombergs. Yaz is out like entertaining clients, doing coke. And again, you got like all these things. We see Gus. He now has blue hair. So
yeah,
we're not
everyone
sure
got a makeover in the off season. And we know that there were 2 years between where these episodes aired. They also gave the trading floor a makeover. They got rid of that red carpet that I hated.
That's what I was telling you. Yep. I will say, Gus, we see with the blue hair. I don't think he appears at all.
Doesn't
later.
have a speaking line.
So we still don't
know
what his deal is, but we do know that something has changed. And I also am going to harp on the COVID situation because it unfortunately screws up their timeline, because basically it would have had to happen that like this was happening during season 1 when they're all going to work events and stuff. So it's like they really should have retroactively gone back to season 1 and like made everything 2019. But also most people are not looking and watching it with like a crazy person's eye the way that you and I are. So
yeah.
So we see Harper in another scene jumping in the pool again. And then we see someone in the pool with a mask on. So clearly a sign that now COVID has been introduced to the storyline. So Harper then runs into some guy and asks, he's like, is the pool free? Harper says, there's another lady in there. And the guy goes, hell is other people, which.
Well, there's so much wrapped up in the throwaway line of hell is other people, right? First of all, for those of you who don't get the reference, this comes from a Jean-Paul Sartre play, which is called No Exit. And it's about 3 characters who are trapped in a waiting room. And ultimately what you find out is this is the depiction of hell. It's basically just other people torturing each other with their presence, right? And when you think about some of the lessons we learned during COVID, everyone was trapped in these isolated quarantine pods with each other, right? It's pretty hard. It's November of 2024 right now. It's hard to remember what that was like, but the strain that put on interpersonal relationships is something that I think deeply informed the writing of this season, but also when you think about it, the aftermath of what that experience was like, that has shaped the entire way that we live and work now. The whole Fridays from home or like a 3-2 workday, that didn't exist, and it definitely did not exist in finance. So we're going to talk a lot about how COVID shaped the way people live and work and how it's informing the writing of this episode, because I think it's actually like a great little cultural time capsule, if you will.
I mean, it's so funny because even just like the act of wearing masks, I feel like sort of in instills in people this like paranoia, and you see it a little bit later in one of the characters on the trading floor, Hillary, which we're going to get to.
Yeah,
But it's one of these things where it's like, I remember at the time, I am not a germaphobe. I like couldn't give a shit, you know? And actually when COVID came on the scene, I was like in the very beginning trying to reassure my brother, who was like a hypochondriac, I swear. And I was like, Brian, you are a young, like healthy guy. You don't need to worry about this. My mom and dad need to worry about this. You are fine. But as we all had to isolate and put on our masks, and you go outside and you're like very conscious then of your personal space, to a point that I feel like now it's when you're in that mindset, like it just creates this paranoia. So it's so funny to see it now. Again, now that we're out of it and out of the paranoia, and I'm back to being like, yeah, whatever. We recently did a trip last week where Jen's like, I'm a little sick. And I was like, sure, we'll share a hotel room. It's fine, you know, but it's just so crazy.
No, and I really want to emphasize that the lens for our viewers who have not worked in finance, do not work in finance, and didn't work in finance pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. The sales and trading world that these characters inhabit, I cannot stress enough how wild their lives would have been during March of 2020. Sales and trading desks, unlike pretty much all other roles in finance, they were never set up for work from home. And so there were tons of disaster recovery setups that were implemented after 9/11 where there was an offsite location ready and waiting, but no one ever really game planned for these businesses where their whole business model was so inherently in person, where you're literally shouting at other people, where eye contact and some kind of communication over a split second can make the difference between like millions of dollars in P&L. So in March of 2020, when the whole system was disrupted, people were basically just like grabbing a bunch of screens, like trying to set up from home in a time of absolute market insanity. So remember last episode, I talked about the circuit breakers being tripped, okay, with huge moves, downward moves specifically in the S&P, okay? There were 4 circuit breakers tripped during March of 2020. So imagine if you're a trader with massive risk, what it was like trying to navigate all that from a setup that you're building the plane as you're flying it. So having a business that is by its nature was never designed to be a work from home setup, and the infrastructure of all that had to be developed on the fly. So while everyone else was kind of like rolling with the punches and fell into a groove and is still now 4 years later working their way out of what that looks like, sales and trading were basically the first people in finance back in the office within literally weeks of the shutdown. And I will say this too, they were the biggest beneficiaries, and we'll see this in some of the conversations that happen. But from the massive volatility in the markets and the ramp up to also like some completely unrelated changes that were happening at the time, like that was when the switch from LIBOR to SOFR was happening. So when there's huge volatility in the markets or things are changing, more clients need to do trades, and the desks can charge more bid offer to do them. So there's more risk, there's more reward opportunities. So like many desks had record years in 2020. And that's something that like is so well captured in this zeitgeist in the show that most people think about, oh, what was happening in the private equity markets? But like very quietly, fixed income sales and trading was having a fucking banner year when everybody else was suffering, sadly.
Yeah. And by the way, I didn't even realize. I was like, oh, I just took a COVID test. I haven't taken a COVID test since like 2021.
Well, no, it was so apropos that you were talking about this.
I totally didn't even realize that. I'm such a psychopath. So anyway, so the next scene, we now figure out who this guy is that Harper ran into in the hall, who was like, hell's other people. So she's on her phone, or I don't know if she's on a phone or whatever.
She's like listening to a podcast and reading an article.
Yeah. But she pulls up and it says, Mr. COVID, Jesse Bloom's pandemic trade turned $28 million into $6 billion. And so that was, again, the guy who she ran into. And this is where I had made a note about like, I was like, funny that the date is November 11th, 2020, which was literally the prior season. So this is why I was like, they should have retroactively gone back and made everything 2019, but also most people aren't crazy. So next thing we have Eric cutting his toenails at the desk, which is like so disgusting.
Well, and it's now extra gross, right? This was something that I saw. This actually happened. This is not an extreme exaggeration, but like, again, in the immediate aftermath of the pandemic, where people are just generally more grossed out by each other than ever, it's that more bold and offensive for him to be doing that because of how much the culture changed.
Yes. So we see he's cutting his toenails, and then he's on the phone with Harper, who again is home, and he's telling her like she needs to come back to the office because everyone else is back in the office. And he says, "How many weeks grace period have I given you?" Well, everyone else has been trickling in. And so she's trying to make the argument that she's better placed there. And Eric says, and I thought that this was like a great like set of lines. He says, "You're invisible where you are. From tomorrow morning, you don't want to be invisible." So apparently New York, actually, this is not the great line that he says. It comes up later. But
well, no,
I guess,
I will say, like, you're invisible where you are. That is a great line because
yes.
I will say this was a political tool. I know very many people who dealt with massive political problems at work as they were navigating that return to office thing. So that was a tool. If you were not there in person, you were getting pushed out. Even when it was like, I'm not there in person because maybe I have like an elderly relative staying with me, or I have a vulnerable person in my life. I mean, this was, I think, like, it also showed some of the worst of the industry in this total disregard. It's like, well, if you're not putting in FaceTime, like, we can't tell you officially, but like, we're going to pay you down.
Right. I mean, I 100% agree. I do think that for someone like Harper, as we're going to see later, I mean, I think that it became something where people got very comfortable, working from home. And I know I'm guilty of this, where I'm like, why would I need to go and do anything in person? Like, I can do it from here. And that's true. But it's like, you and I even say this. We are very efficient together working. I mean, I'm in Boston, you're in Charlotte, but when we're together, it's just a different energy. But
there's more magic.
There is.
It's so true. And it's not only that, it's so specific to this very special segment of the job where the in-person nature of it. And Eric has some great lines about that. I totally agree.
Yeah. So he tells her, "A year is too long to be on your own. Tomorrow, please." So next day we do see Harper. She's coming back in the office. She's going
looks
up.
Fabulous.
She looks
I love
great.
Her makeover. Whatever happened with her makeup and her, like, she just looks great. I was feeling her return to office look.
Yes. And the first person she sees is Rishi. And like Rishi's very standoffish. So we don't know if anything has happened.
But I also think that's indicative of like she waltzes back on the floor like, I'm here, everyone. No one gives a shit, right? Like no one cares.
This is also true. But so who does care is she goes into the bathroom and shocker of all shocker, who does she see? She sees Yaz. And again, I think Harper is like trying to mend fences. So she's trying to make small talk. She's like, "It's been a while since I last pissed in public." And Yaz goes, "I'd advise using one of the cubicles." So Yaz is like showing that she like doesn't want any of this. And Yaz
it's like that dry British humor. Like,
yes. But she's washing her hands, doing what I think we all were taught, like 20 seconds or 2 minutes, or I don't know how much, saying happy birthday.
Yeah.
And Harper just goes germaphobe. And again, Yaz is just like, no. So Harper tells her that she wants to be cordial and doesn't want this to affect their work. And Yaz is like, "We don't have an issue." And then as she walks away, under her breath, Harper says bitch and Yaz says cunt, which actually is, like, she loves that word, but also this comes back in a minute.
Yeah.
So next scene, they're in the team meeting and that guy Adler is zooming in. So he's obviously in New York. And they're talking about cost cutting and possibly the New York CPS assuming London CPS, or London CPS assuming New York.
Well, yeah, he says, despite trading flows and volumes booming, I think we're still prudent to lean out our operation while the going's good. This is so fucking typical, by the way. It's like, things are great. You might get fired. Like, what? So whenever there's volatility, this is an opportunity politically within these firms to make power plays. And so clearly Adler is making a big power play here. We already know that he's wrested power away from the Sarahs and the Darias of last season. Now it's a New York versus London power struggle, and that's what they seem to be setting up for this season. I could be wrong, but I assume that's a theme for the rest of it.
Yeah. So Dan, there's this new guy, Dan VD something, because he later says
Daniel Van Deventer.
Yes. So he is an executive director joining London from New York. And it's clear that him and Eric have some kind of history. But Eric then pipes and says, "Who subsumes who?" And Danny is like, "Hey, Eric." And Eric dismisses him, saying he's trying to talk to Dan's boss. Adler says, "Daniel is worryingly young for someone I trust so much," showing Eric basically not to dismiss him and that this guy actually has some power. So Eric says, "If you take the best minds and mouths out of London, you're out of your mind." Harper then hops in and asks, "How do we protect ourselves?" And to which Adler says, "Production. Your worth to the firm is who you know outside of the firm and how you monetize." And so Dan
is a good old, your network is your net worth. And
100%.
The only person we saw doing that last season was Yasmin, bringing new accounts via her relationships. And so you know that Harper doesn't have anyone in her network, right? She's a fish out of water. She's an American in London. She doesn't have some deeply entrenched network of fancy school friends. So you can see her a little bit pensively like, who the hell do I know? How am I going to increase production with new accounts? So you can see the wheels already starting to turn that that's going to be her goal.
Yep. So I also thought it was interesting that then Dan is like, we should work together. A rising tide lifts all boats. And Eric, we know about his gripe with Daria last season, who had more of that mentality. He just like leaves and he's annoyed. Dan then pipes in, which again is a nod to kind of what was going on at the time. He says, okay, team, I've got an anti-bullying and harassment training today. Hopefully I'll pick up some tips. Really looking forward to working with you all.
Well, yeah, he says, to be clear, he says, I've got bullying and harassment training, right? It wasn't anti-bullying and harassment training. So he's making the joke that he's learning how to bully and harass. Right. But obviously it's anti-bullying. Yeah. So that's
got it. Love that. I totally missed that. This is why it's fun to do this, Jen.
Yeah, no, he's not actually looking for tips on how to not bully and harass people. He's joking that he'll learn how to bully and harass, which is, of course, a very subtle dig at Eric, because that was kind of Eric's MO, right? And that's the old school, vibe on the trading floor.
100%. So now the next scene we see. So if you remember back to season 1, there was this really obnoxious candidate who was giving Yaz a hard time. We find out her name is Venetia, but she was the one who was like, there's no women. I forget exactly what she said, but it was very
annoying,
aggressive and annoying. Yeah, it was just like totally not cool. So how she got the job, I have no clue.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? She was saying all the right things politically, right? This is peak Me Too movement, right? This woman is coming in. She's got strong lines about promoting women in the business. She would have been a shoo-in for the job politically. And now she's working as Yasmin's new analyst. This relationship, by the way, I could write a PhD thesis on this relationship. I have so much to say about this relationship. Like it deserves its own episode. But
it really does. Yes, it really does. So Yaz is trying to give her some tips, right? So Yaz is no longer the new grad. She's like the seasoned second-year analyst. And so Venetia says that she applied for the CPS desk but got put on FX, which, like, by the way, is like such an obnoxious thing to say. And so Jackie and Yaz are there then kind of like putting down CPS. They're like, yeah, they're not that great. Like Rishi's market update is useless. Like nobody knows who's driving over there anymore. And Jackie says, you could call them a bag of cunts. And the new grad then says, like, that word is pretty unacceptable, which, like, we've been talking about. Like, this word is used, like, so casually all the time. And Yaz replies, unless you really love the person, right? Which I thought was so interesting back to, like, earlier when she literally under her breath called Harper a cunt. Because I do think it speaks to, like, she's just so hurt by her. So I liked that they did that.
Wait, there's so much more to this scene. Okay, hang on.
Yeah. Add in whatever you want.
First of all, Venetia, right out of the gates, is setting boundaries in a way that Yasmin did not. Venetia's like, I think that word is unacceptable. She's coming out and saying that. Everything that Yasmin observed that was unacceptable to her, she was just like, well, I'll just roll with the punches and I'll be the cool girl, 100%, right?
Yeah.
So I think that it's really important that we already see this new analyst who looks down on Yasmin's desk was blatantly like, oh, FX is just a glamorous bureau de change or whatever. This analyst is coming in guns blazing after you've seen Yasmin strutting around the desk like she owns the place now as Miss Second Year Analyst. So they're clearly very set to butt heads. But there is a series of off-camera dialogue that we hear from Rishi throughout the episode that they pepper in one-liners to give you a sense of what was happening in the markets at the time. So he throws out in succession a number of different buzzwords. So during this scene, he shouts out, does anyone know what a fucking SPAC is? Okay, for all of you who obviously may or may not now know what SPACs are, SPACs exploded during COVID when there was so much stimulus being pumped into the system. So Kristen has done a deep dive into SPACs on our big podcast. Feel free to listen to that.
By the way, I need to also hype it up. Sorry, just to like add in, it's one of my favorite episodes that we've done because it's not just like a standalone SPAC episode. We basically broke down We Crashed and used it to talk a little bit about just like IPOs in general and then SPACs. So it is one of my favorite episodes. So I just wanted to add that little plug.
So Kristen, for our listeners, what is a SPAC?
A SPAC it's also called like a blank check IPO. Oh, special purpose acquisition company. So the idea is someone goes out and they essentially raise a bunch of money for the sole purpose of buying another company. You don't know what company they are going to buy. So it's an IPO of a company that does nothing. It's basically like a holding company.
Yep.
And then the idea is that over, say, the next like 18 to 24 months, there's some sponsor. And so they have to go out and find a company to merge with. Now, the company that they merge with is private. And by the nature of merging with the SPAC, because the SPAC is publicly traded, the company goes public. So it's almost like a backdoor into companies going public, not via the traditional IPO process. So this is why, again, the kind of the story about what happened with Recrash was so interesting, because WeWork, right? Adam Newman's WeWork, which, by the way, we went to a WeWork last week. It was the first time I've been there, and they are awesome. I totally understand why people bought into the magic.
Yep.
But WeWork tried to go public, and it just like crashed and burned. There was a lot of reasons why. Again, we get into it in a tremendous amount of detail, but they were not able to go public. And part of the reason is that, like, it's a very factual, like when you go public, the disclosure that the SEC requires is very like vanilla, and it's all past looking. Like, you can't have forward guidance. Like, it's just, this is what it is. All these risk factors, blah, 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 blah. With a SPAC, you are taking, again, a company, a blank check company public. And then when you're going to do the merger, right, when you're buying this other company, you can have all these like super like glowy, like rosy projections. And by the way, when they did this back with WeWork, they were like, we're going to double our revenue over the next 5 years. Spoiler alert, they like went bankrupt within the next, I think, 24 to 48 months. So it's a really interesting case study. But again, the whole idea, blank check company goes public, and then they buy a company, which the nature of buying it and doing this merger means that that private company is now publicly traded. So it's a backdoor into going public.
And to give you guys a sense of what was happening at the time, because there was so much money being pumped into the system, in 2019, a total of 59 SPACs were created, accounting for something like $13 billion of investment. 2020 saw 247 SPACs created with $80 billion invested. So that accounted for something like more than 50% of all the new publicly listed companies in the United States that year. So that's how big these things were in 2020. And I think it's really important that the show is like highlighting all the things that have happened. They're basically trying to do a little exposition about everything that went on in 2020 to set the market environment. It's a genius way to do it.
Yeah. Again, this episode was great. I'm so on board with what you said. I so agree with it. And I literally didn't even notice that. And I'm so happy you pointed that out.
Yeah, we've got a couple of other ones that'll be fun that we don't need to go into as much detail because I think they're more household names. And I totally agree with you on the analysis of Yasmin, that what she's saying by saying, oh, you only say that word about someone you really love. Okay, are you saying you really love Harper deep down inside and you want to mend these fences? Because I have hope for their friendship again, but so far there hasn't been a glimmer. Okay, so now we've got Harper arriving back on the CPS desk.
Yes. So now Harper comes back and Eric says, welcome back to the party, and asks why she was late. Harper's like, I was trying to psych myself up. This was, I thought, really funny. So Eric then asks for a cup of coffee, only if you're getting one, to which Harper says, I wasn't. And so Eric says, well, you'll want one eventually. And then Robert walks over saying that he's happy to get the coffee. And by the way, now we know that he got the job. And then he's like, I can go out. And Eric's like, well, Harper's getting me one. So the whole thing.
Well, there's a lot to it because Harper, in all of the conversations that she and Eric have had thus far, one of the things that she's been lobbying for is half the sales credits on some trades that have been done with Phelim. So she's saying, hey, listen, we're setting the scene now that Harper is a second-year analyst. Again, being a second-year analyst, you're like a real person now at the bit. Like you're doing stuff,
no longer
right?
an NRP, Jen?
No longer an NRP. So you're a real person. You start, and this is very true. You start thinking you're hot shit because there's people under you finally. And Eric is saying, you're back here, Harper, but you still work for me. I'm putting you in your place. You're still getting me coffee. And Robert just wants to get coffee because he is looking for something to do. And Eric immediately calls him out on it and says, you haven't made a single outgoing call. You're just doing all the passive stuff. You're writing some digest that nobody's reading, right?
Yep.
And he calls him Bob, first of all.
I saw that. Yeah. Yep.
And then he calls him Robert Ford and calls him a coward. So it's basically a reference to the movie The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, which I never saw, to be honest. It's a Brad Pitt and Casey Affleck movie. But you get the drift, right? He's calling him a coward and he's saying he needs to take some risks. So he tells him to pull up the dormant client list and start making some outgoing phone calls. So we know now the whole backstory of what Robert's been up to for the past 18 months. He's been adrift, essentially just pushing papers around in the year plus since we last saw him, which makes me so sad. Poor Robert.
I know, I know. Yeah, so then they're sitting down now, and Harper asks, and I'm not really sure what the meaning of this was. I think it might just be like casual conversation, although I don't think anything they say is ever not with meaning. But she asks who's sitting in the desk in between Harper and Eric says New York said to keep that empty. So we don't necessarily know what that has anything to do with, and we don't even know if it's going to come back to being anything at all. And again, Harper then wants to talk about the sales credits, and Eric is like, what about that coffee? Basically like, yeah, no, not now. So over at FX, Yaz is on the phone talking to Maxim. And so this is where we see Hillary, her boss. He is masked up, and he also has the
blue
gloves.
surgical gloves on. Yeah. Yasmin is like thinking again, her whole demeanor has changed.
Yeah.
She's got the headset on. She's not on the black phone under the desk. And she is strutting up and down the aisle talking to Maxim, which is it's such a great depiction of like what you do when you feel like you're a hot shit salesperson. You're letting everybody hear your phone call, and she's talking in all her different foreign languages to Maxim, and she's just this like sexy FX saleswoman. And she's
Jen.
Well, she's what
she
Jen was at
on.
her most obnoxious. Like this episode, I identified with Yasmin in so many different ways. I can't even tell you. But yes, I am so guilty of this and thinking I was amazing and really was not at all.
But so her and Maxim are having this like super bougie conversation. He's talking about how his parents are on some exorbitantly pricey villa. And Yaz is like, oh, I went to some super spreaders and never caught COVID. And Maxim says, the blessings of privilege. It's like a halo. And she says, better than any mask. So anyway, over at CPS, Robert is now asking Harper about Nicole because he's looking at the list of those dormant clients. And Harper basically tells him, like, don't waste your time. And then Eric asks about the fund out of Brevin, saying to Harper that she needs to show Maxim that she is the more sophisticated coverage. And Harper's like, I don't want to step on any toes. Again, the whole history with Yaz right now is not great. Eric obviously does not give a shit.
This is an insane thing to ask her to do. To interrupt some other salesperson's phone call and pitch your desk to their client without having run it by them first this is like a fireable offense. That kind of power play, the only way you would do it is if you were super close with that person and like you both knew the client and you all had history. Then you could hop on and be like, oh, shut up with the dummies in FX. Like, come trade with us in rates, right? I could totally see that happening if things are good. So for Eric, who knows exactly who Harper is, who understands everything going on, it is such a wild thing to do to ask her to jump on Yasmin's call. There's no way he doesn't know that things are bad between them. That's just inconceivable to me.
Yes. But I mean, I do think that Harper is picking up that he's worried about CPS London underperforming New York. And it's like, he has like a one-track mind. It's like when he wants to do something, he doesn't care about the ethics. He doesn't care about the norms. He's just like, just do this shit.
I'm glad Harper pushed back and wasn't just like, yes, sir, whatever you say, sir. At least she pushes back. And meanwhile, in the background, Rishi's going, is anyone young enough to give a fuck about meme stocks? Because people keep asking me about them. So that's the second reference we have to kind of place us culturally, because at the time it was GameStop.
Which is going to come back later in the season.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's new to me.
So Harper hops on the line with Yaz and Maxim, and she hears Maxim say to Yaz that this might be their last professional phone call, and he'll explain it a bit later at some party. He says careers don't blow up every day. So as he says this, Harper makes herself known, and Maxim is not pleased. He says in Spanish to Yaz, like, what is this, Nixon's White House? And so Harper then pipes in, says, hey, like, she just wants to let him know that they're there if they need any flows from CPS. And again, in Spanish, he asks Yaz if she knew that Harper was listening, and she's like, no, but I shouldn't be surprised, which also true. And so Harper then tries to tell him that some layup trade over the past 12 months has been selling the dollar. And then she chokes and can't finish her sentence. It's like her confidence is totally shattered and she just chokes.
Which is her thing all the time, which is what happened during the season finale where she had to give the speech.
Yeah.
I mean, so she's tried to make this power play, completely falls on her face. I mean, what is wrong with this woman? What is happening?
I know. So obviously Yaz is pissed, and Rishi overhears this interaction and starts laughing. Harper says to Rishi, did I do something funny? To which Rishi replies, I'm amused. Harper says, do we have a fucking problem? To which Rishi says, Harper, I think less about you than I think about climate change.
He goes, do you want a guided tour of your irrelevancy to me? Which was a fabulous trader takedown line.
Yes. So then he comes over the hoot. He says, my problem is we've had an empty seat on this desk since the rest of us came back. I'm glad you had the balls to execute with other traders during your extended vacation. Harper then asks if that means that she's essentially, if she asks him for a price, if he's not going to give it to her. And Rishi says, no, that is reserved for people who work here. And then Harper tries to say that she's like putting in these 12-hour days, to which Rishi says, drifting around a hotel suite, brewing coffee, and attacking yourself does not make a job of work. You're only God in your own head because none of us see the tape. None of it is monetized. And like,
what does he mean by attacking herself? So I was like, does that mean self-harm? Like, what has she been up to? Because
that's a good
why
question.
has she been allowed? So she's been staying in a hotel. She's not been at home. She doesn't have a home. So she's been staying in this hotel.
Because she was with Yaz last season and Yaz hates her. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But so she's staying in a hotel. Like, we have to wonder what were the circumstances where she was allowed this special treatment to continue working from home when everybody
Especially
else
when Hillary's back. And Hillary is like wildly paranoid.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, well, we know that Eric is looking out for her and Hillary has to put in the FaceTime because, again, otherwise he's just a stuffed shirt MD and he's not actually doing anything. But that thing about attacking yourself, I was just like, what? Like, did something happen? And as we go through the episode, Eric continually makes suggestions that she go and speak with the firm psychologist or whatever. So I don't know if this plays out in the rest of the season, but I am curious to understand like what her mental state is and how much they know about it, given she was outed to everyone as being a total wreck when she flubbed her final thing.
That's my guess. I'm guessing they saw her and what happened in that final thing. So they might worry that there's something with her mental health. That's my guess. That's the only thing I can think of. I don't remember seeing anything about anything more than that, although it's definitely possible that I just missed it. So we'll see. But again, I don't think it was anything more than people like know that there's like some stuff going on with her, just in like even the panic attack sense.
Okay,
but
got it.
Harper then looks at Eric and says, are you going to let him talk to me like that? And to which he says, let him. I'm not your keeper. I shouldn't have to listen in on your calls and make sure you're doing your job. Harper replies, well, maybe I'm your fucking keeper. You should remember that. And Eric replies, off the desk right now. And so Rishi also like calls out the fact that they're going for like a secret powwow. Because again, like clearly like they do have, like they are protecting each other.
Yeah, so when Harper says that maybe Eric should remember that she's his keeper, she's trying to flex on him. Remember, I'm the reason that you're back here. I helped you make this power play that got you reinstated. Yeah. Didn't they also reference the daddy line here, referencing back to the title?
I don't think so, only because neither of us wrote it down. I feel like both of us probably would, and if neither of us did, then it's probably a low chance. But
again, she's asking Eric to stick up for her and fight her battles for her. And he's basically like, I've had enough battles for you. You and Rishi need to figure your shit out, which is also, I think, a very healthy thing for a manager to do, that these junior analysts in sales need to make peace with the traders. They need to have a good relationship with them. It's really important. Yeah. And so for Harper to be jeopardizing that is a problem.
100%. Okay, so next scene, we're now with Yaz and Venetia. And Yaz tells her, you're supposed to be getting the lunches.
Well, hang on. So Venetia comes to the desk with just her lunch.
Yeah.
And so Yasmin goes, it's kind of an unwritten rule that the grad gets lunch for the desk in FX. Okay, if you're telling someone about an unwritten rule, it's written now, right? Like you're making it a rule. And the grad's like, huh? And Yasmin goes, oh, sorry, I should have warned you. You'll get used to dimming your light. Like I'm your big sister. I'm so sorry that this is the way things are around here. I don't write the rules, but I'm your ally and I'll be here for you while you go through this. That is such a great and complex line because no one else has said this. No one else is trying to enforce this. It is Yasmin who is writing these rules because we all remember.
And it was Kenny who did it to her. Mm-hmm. And Kenny is not on the desk right now.
Yes, we have not seen Kenny yet. And I thought he'd been written out, to be honest. He comes back later. I thought he was just written off the show. But yeah, so Venetia says, I just don't think that's what I'm here to do. It sets a precedent. And Yasmin offers her free advice. Mm-hmm. She said, you're going to need to get everyone on side early. There's a system. So now Yasmin is carrying the torch of the toxic culture that she was put through. This scene is everything, okay? Sydney Sweeney just spoke publicly. You sent me this article and said, the whole thing of women helping women in Hollywood is a myth. We've been taught since birth that there's one spot, whatever it is, one spot with the guy, one spot in the company, whatever it is, for one woman. And we all need to stab each other to get there. And this is exactly what Yasmin is perpetuating for this woman. So she's like, I had to do the salad runs. Now you have to do the salad runs. And I don't know about you, but watching this, I sympathize with Yasmin.
Oh, I do too. I was going to say, I sympathize with Yasmin. I was annoyed.
And I'm annoyed by Venetia. And I think that this is such brilliant writing that it makes me feel that complex way, because no one should have to do these stupid salad runs. Okay, first of all, order online, guys. Like, what year is it?
There's a piece of me that also disagrees a little bit. If you're working in a little unit, right? People have different roles. Venetia can't really do much of anything right now. You've talked about this before. Yes. She doesn't add much value. I'm
a believer in the coffee run. You know I'm a believer in the let's demonstrate, let's add value in small ways. However, I meant that specifically for these stupid fucking salad runs that they are doing, because they are the most wildly inefficient. In the year 2009, we used to order online. I would handle all the orders because I was the most junior person on the desk. I would handle all the orders, and I would go downstairs and grab the bag and whatever, right? Like, so yes, you were doing the blocking and tackling, but it is the year 2022 when they are filming this. That's supposed to, I mean, I'm sorry, but like what Yasmin was doing was the most inefficient, time-sucking thing.
Was bad at
that was the point. She was bad at it. She was bad at the junior level things. I actually think Venetia would be good at it. Like,
I feel like though it kind of goes to something that we've talked about, which is like there is a little bit of people acting like I'm too good to do this thing. That like, no, I mean, it's something that everyone needs to eat. It's a little thing you can do to show that you're trying to add value, to show that you don't think you're too good for things.
Yes.
And I think that what bothered me was this attitude of like, I am too good for this when everyone else has had to do it. It's not like they only made the women do it. They made everybody do it. And so
Kenny did it.
And
everyone did it. Yes.
And if it was like we talked about, there is a difference between having people do stuff that is completely useless. Like you shouldn't be staying late because like your past person said late for no purpose at all. But everyone does need to eat. So I think that having something where it's like, as a junior person, everyone does this. And by the way, once then this Venetia person is a second year analyst, there's a new grad who's going to do it. So I disagree with Venetia that it's we should break the cycle. It's like,
that's what she says. So she says,
you act like you're too good for this.
Yeah, she edges over towards where Hillary is. And he goes, please be aware of the droplet area. He's fucking hilarious. And she says, I don't think it's appropriate that the junior person on the desk gets the lunches. Yasmin's sitting there waiting for Hillary to drop the hammer. But you can see, I think Hillary being shown in the mask and the gloves and the paranoia also is a bit of a visual cue that the cultural shift that has happened has beaten him down. So he just goes, all right. And Venetia says, I think it's important that we try to break the cycle, don't you? This performative feminist bullshit. And Yasmin's like, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, fuck you, I don't believe this at all. But now I have to save face because I don't want to seem like I'm anti-feminist. I mean, I could literally talk about this scene for years. There's so many layers of complexity. So Hillary, who had no problem talking about shooting and hunting with Ghislaine Maxwell and being like, oh, are you going to make a problem about the fact that we had you out at a strip club because I only hire team players? The toxic culture was definitely coming from the top down. And now he's like, what am I going to do? Like push back in the current cultural environment that has shifted so much. So he's like, okay, whatever. Yeah, you don't have to get lunches. Let's all get our own lunches, right? And Yasmin's like, what the fuck? No, wait, all of a sudden I look like I'm carrying this torch of toxicity? Like, how did this happen? So I just, oh my God, I feel for Yasmin so much because, and I do think 100% to your point, there are the little things that you can do, right? By the way, like again, I think the physically getting the stupid lunches, like Yasmin was bad at getting the salads. And that's what I mean. Like there should be no getting off the desk to get these damn salads. But you can show everyone like, hey, listen, I'm a master logistician. Everyone has a different order with the croutons, with the dressing on the side, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You and I were just part of a group salad order the other day, by the way. Like there is an art to it, right? And like our orders were wrong.
And getting the details right. I mean, it's those little things. It's like if you can be trusted with the salad, like you can be trusted with a client who's invested investing millions and millions of dollars.
Correct.
So that's why I disagree. I think there are places where there's like wildly toxic culture. To me, this was not that. The way that Kenny treated her when she got the, croutons wrong, that was toxic. But like having the junior person get the salads as like something little that they could do to help out, I'm okay with that. And I think that it's really kind of messed up that here this person is acting like she's too good for a salad run. Like
it was
that was my problem. Yeah.
Such a poking on the exact bruise of our generation versus the next generation coming up, where we were like, the answer is yes. What's the question? I just live to please, with the new cultural phenomenon of like, I have boundaries. How dare you ask me to do something that isn't in my job title, which is such a critical source of friction. And so here's Yasmin trying to assert herself as hot shit on the desk. And here's this new woman who is politically clobbering her at every turn. And it's so interesting to see. I freaking love it. Okay, sorry. Let's move on.
And then at the very end,
more to talk about with this relationship.
I know. Yeah, it keeps going. But she does say at the end, Venetia, like, has just like, oh, I have a friend who just started at Millennium. Okay. The next scene I really love. I literally have written here, like, I love this scene as a commentary on work from home. And also I liked Eric's mentoring of Harper here because it goes back and forth where he is like a horrible person. He's a terrible manager. And then he's like a good manager and it goes back and forth. So next scene, Harper and Eric are outside smoking. And Eric says, I don't think you're taking care of yourself. To which Harper replies, how is that any of your business? And Eric goes, when it's literally my business. That's how, which is 100% true.
Yeah.
And so Harper says, I told you this worked better when I was home. And Eric says, you were rotting in that room. And so he says, Rishi's phrasing was uncouth, but the person I've been speaking with over the phone, on Zoom, whatever the fuck, isn't who I hired. You're passive, you're sloppy, New York will notice. They can't not with new eyes on the desk. As much as we do this job over the phone, there's no substitute for being up in a client's face. Up in a trader's face, seeing the whites of their eyes. The bit that makes sense about this job is living it. So you can go back to that hotel room, opt out of life, or be the Harper I know, the Harper who bangs on doors. Harper asks, why are you preaching me like this? And Eric says, you need to work on your fucking anger and bury the hatchet with Rishi, please. So Harper just gives him attitude and is like, sure, happy fucking families. But I love that because everything he said was spot on.
Yes.
And it was true. Like, it was the easier thing for her to do, to go in the room and hide and be there. And she was rotting there. And it was terrible for her. It was terrible for her self-confidence. It was terrible for her work performance. And I do think that something that came out of work from home is people got comfortable doing things that were maybe not beneficial for them. Like, we forget how important it is to have human connection, to be person to person. And you and I talk about this a lot in the context of like, especially for people who are recruiting and like, especially with like some of what's going to be coming with AI, there is no substitute for person to person interaction. And like, I just think that it's something that with Zoom, it feels like the same thing. I feel like I'm seeing you when I see you over the screen. And when we're together, it's like, oh my God, it's like, it's a different thing. And so I love this. That's all.
I think that you are so right about what it means for the job. And I think what's also so important about this, showing the negative impact on Harper's mental health. She's home. She thinks she needs to be home because her mental health is in a bad place. But what we see time and time again is this shift that has happened culturally with the work from home, with the stay home, with the Zoom, with let's not write each other emails, let's have AI do it for it, let's not talk to each other. The more we take away those incremental, tiny human interactions, how can we then be so shocked to find that feelings of depression, hopelessness, despair, poor communication skills? Just think about this, right? We talk through Zoom. We talk through our little portal all day long. We write each other text messages and we talk on the phone. We literally communicate in any way aside from telepathy that we conceivably can. Yet when we saw each other last week, I arrived at the hotel at 8:30, 9 p.m. or something like that.
We so stayed tired, up by the way.
Until, Kristen was tucked in bed. I'm sitting there. The very kind hotel gave us a bottle of wine. I'm sitting there drinking this bottle of wine by myself. But we stayed up talking until midnight. I mean, there's no shortage of opportunities for us to talk, but that being together in person is just so energizing. There is something so real about it and how it impacts your mental health and how it sustains you. I'm sorry, like, not to get all woo or whatever. I'm sure that there's some scientific studies that can prove that different parts of your brain are activated by seeing other people physically in person. But I don't need some scientific study to tell me that. We have this demonstrated across wide swaths of our society, especially the impact on young people. It's just not how humans are raised. We're tribal. We're not meant to interact with the screen all day. So I could not agree with this more. And it is so specific to the job of sales and trading, more so than I think most other roles, especially when you're talking about investment banking, where you can work on a project for 6 months, right? It's so easy to fall into those traps. I think it's super healthy to do all these things in other roles, but in sales and trading, it is quite literally essential to the job function itself, no matter how much you try to say it's electronic and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because like I was teaching during COVID and we did virtual classes and people loved them. I still think there is absolutely no substitute for doing a live class. It is just, there is absolutely nothing. There's
no way to hide when you're in person
you're
learning,
forced
right?
To focus.
Yeah, if you're hiding behind a laptop,
people
you don't have to be on screen. Yes, exactly.
Like when I used to do modeling, I'd walk around. I could see what someone was doing. I'm like, oh, I see you're doing it this way. Let me show you this other way to do it, right? I can show them the keys. Like it's this whole other element. And I do think back to like the networking. Anyway, I'm like going to get off my high horse, but I just wanted to reinforce.
I couldn't agree more. We both feel the same way. And
Well, and emphasize his this one comment again. The bit that makes sense about this job is living it. That is chef's kiss. So okay, so back on the desk, everyone is getting ready to go, and for some reason, like they're turning off the lights.
The
like
lights
as people are still
down. I
there.
hadn't thought about that too. Okay, first of all, the lights on these trading floors, they're literally usually on motion sensors, and they don't typically turn all the way off like that. So even if you stayed really late, I mean, if there were wide swaths of the trading floor where people had gone home from the day, those lights might dim or turn off a little bit. But if there's one person moving around, you would have like an entire block of the bright white fluorescent lights that they have in like the changing rooms at department stores.
So that was a little weird.
There's tons of people still on the trading floor and they're acting like it's in the middle of the night.
I know. But so Eric then he says again to Harper, he says, I need you to do something for me. The firm now offers an in-house service for issues, mood, the more mental side of your health, since we all came back. And Harper says, I know you don't think I need that. To which Eric says, it would behoove us for you to go. And Harper's like, well, why are you talking to me like that? And Eric says, what difference does it make if it's corporate diktat or if I care as your manager? And Harper's like, you're covering your ass, which he probably is, but I also do think he cares. And then she asks if he's ever gone to speak to them. He doesn't reply. He just says, third floor, I'm told it's all confidential. Interesting way to phrase, by the way. Like, I'm told it's all confidential, not it is confidential. I'm told it is. And actually, unrelated, I had this note. We had Kat Sosnick on a prior episode of our big podcast. She was someone who worked at Tiger back in the day, which if you've ever seen Billions, the hedge fund Axe Capital was based, I believe, on Tiger. And it was true that they had this in-house psychiatrist. So I thought it was so interesting because like back then it was like a thing. And actually, again, in Billions, these traders would go see psychiatrists all the time because being a better trader, like you had to kind of get in with like, why are you not taking risk, right? It's like the scorpion that doesn't sting or whatever. So I felt like there's not that much stigma anymore, and especially in like the financial services industry. So I thought that it was interesting that she was so like put off by that. But I don't know.
Well, of course, because Harper has such a toxic relationship with herself. I think that she's unwilling to trust someone else. But I will say, in the decade that I worked at different banks, I never once heard of one of these services being offered in-house at an investment bank. And quite frankly, I think that's where you could use them more so than on the buy side. You know, I think this would be a great investment for an investment bank to have an in-house help counseling service. I think that'd be great. I wish they did.
So anyway, good for them. Good for like our fake Peer Point for having that. So in the background, Rishi is talking to his fiance and Harper says goodnight to Rishi. And he just like, cause she's trying to bury the hatchet now. He like doesn't reply. Robert then tells her he's engaged, distracted. You should come to his engagement drinks. He told me to invite you. Harper's like, no, he didn't. And Robert says, well, they're effectively team drinks. Plus you need to meet his bird. So Harper asks what she's like. And Robert replies, posh enough to podcast. One of those podcasts that tells upper middle class women what to read, what to feel. And Harper's like, oh, fuck, I'll go from an anthropologic perspective. And then she's like, I can't believe you forgot to tell me that Rishi is engaged. And Robert just replies, it's work, isn't it? Which is back to like what we talked about in the past with like Greg, where when she was like, do you think Eric's a good person? He's like, I don't think about him.
Is Greg going to come back in this season? Because we haven't seen him. Did he get written off the show? So Greg's
got written off. He makes a cameo at the very end of season 3. Daria will make a quick cameo.
Oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Stop
Oh, no,
spoiling.
no, no.
Stop spoiling.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I wasn't trying to spoil, but like we know she's gone. So it's just like anyone who they write off, they will like casually
They
bring
could
back,
come back.
just so you can
Okay,
see them.
got it.
Well, you see them because they land at other places. So then there's interactions there. So sorry, I'm not giving any like specific spoilers. That literally tells you nothing about the plot. I'm just saying that we do see her again. So anyway, so next scene, now Yaz is going to Maxim's party. And so she's trying to get in a cab.
No, Yasmin is buying drugs.
Oh, is that what's happening?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I totally missed that part. Okay.
Yasmin is heading to Maxim's party and she is scoring coke ahead of the party. So her normal drug dealer apparently makes multiple clients as happy as he can in these trips because she's not in her normal location. So while she's in the car with him negotiating this drug deal, another woman comes in the car and she's this beautiful blonde woman with an accent. And she says, yeah, I need it to get through the night. I'm meeting a client. I'm selling myself as always. So Yasmin takes this literally and assumes that she is an escort. So Yasmin, having procured her cocaine, goes into the party and this woman is ahead of her. So she's like, I guess we're both going to the same place. Like, so you can see the wheels turning in Yasmin's brain. Like, oh, I guess Maxim is hiring prostitutes at this party. Okay, some kind of party. And this woman says, well, Maxim has introduced me to a lot of my clients. And when Yasmin asks what kind of clients, she says, a lot of people here use my services. So again, it's very clear what Yasmin suspects, and this woman is doing nothing to disabuse her of this notion. You're kind of following along with Yasmin. And again, this does look like, given how much the writers of this show have tried to suggest that everyone in the finance world is into, drugs and random sex or whatever, it's like, well, is it that much of a leap that they would have prostitutes at this party? Mm-hmm. So they've set you up where it's not that big of a mental leap. And we find out that this party is in honor of Silver Kite blowing up. And Yasmin now realizes that she has lost her largest client. And so she's about to embark on this evening of fun.
Yes. So next scene, Robert is having sex and basically like,
he's having some performance issues.
He's having some performance issues. Thank you. The woman asks if it happens a lot and also says like sober dates are basically corporal punishment. So we know that now Robert is sober and that also he's having some trouble performing. So that's the main point of this which by the way, like does become a plot point. So I wanted to add that context. So, all right. So now we're back to Harper, who is stalking someone on Instagram.
Instagram account itself is someone called Helene Huff. She has a post that is a picture of her out to dinner holding the hand of someone off frame. And there's a caption in German that unfortunately I wasn't able to get my husband to translate, but according to Google Translate, it says dinner with my sweetheart. And the hashtag says chef's table. So then Harper clicks on the person who's tagged and it's someone called Pog Daddy 911. And this person has 0 posts, 192 followers, and 500 people they are following. Not that I double checked as someone who has, we have our own Instagram account. So I was just like, well, I got to figure out how many followers they have. So then to your point, she has gone back to this photo that she was stalking and she decides to message Pog Daddy 911, whom we have no idea who this is.
I mean, we have a guess who it is, but yes. So she DMs them and says, Berlin, I know it's you. So I assume it's her brother.
That's what I assumed because that's the only mysterious person in her life. And I've been waiting for this, what I think is a stupid plot line to unfold. I really hope that it's an outstanding plot line. But yeah.
I will not give you any spoilers. So back at the party, Yaz and Celeste are doing coke and Celeste comments, this is basically my job, entertaining. So she's continually trying to put on this thing. And so Yaz says, I have to ask. And she opens it by saying like, I'm so sorry if this is offensive. My job's not interesting, but like, I'd love to know what your life is like. What is it like being a sex worker or sex professional? And so Celeste says, I'll tell you what my job is like if you tell me why yours isn't interesting. And Yaz says, I work at a bank, FX sales. It's about as sexy as it sounds. Well,
she's totally condescending, right? Like, you might not know what this is.
True.
I work at an investment bank. FX
In fairness,
sales,
most people wouldn't know what the hell that is.
Of course. So she's explaining it like you would explain it to a prostitute who has not worked in investment banking. That's exactly what she's doing.
Or to like any average person who like just has no idea what investment banking is. So,
which happens to me all the time, by the way. Like I will meet men and they'll be like, I work at an investment bank. You probably wouldn't know what it is I do. I'm like, try me, buddy.
So Celeste says that she works with high net worth individuals and families. And Yaz is like shocked by the families comment.
There's a great line. So this song comes on that interrupts their conversation. And she's like, oh, I love this song. Let's go dance. And the woman, whose name we don't know yet, casually throws out the fact that she was up in the DJ booth when Solomon, and we know that she's referring to DJ D-Sol, who was David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, first played it at Bonica, which I guess is some like EDM scene thing in London or whatever. So like
funny. I thought she was talking about Solomon Brothers, but you're right. David Solomon. You're right.
I don't think.
No, he's not like he's a DJ. I do know that the CEO of Goldman is a DJ. I just, for whatever reason, thought she was talking about something related to the fall of Solomon Brothers. So I was confused. But what you said makes more sense.
Yeah.
So now Celeste and Yaz, they're all getting ready to go. And Maxim says, I'm so glad that you two women met. And Maxim asks if they ever met at work. And Yaz is just like, excuse me? And he says, well, Celeste is an MD at Pierpoint, Private Wealth Management. And Yaz is like, oh my God. And she's like, I'm sorry, it was just too much fun messing with you. As she says that, Maxim is like, this is Yasmin Kara Hanani, emphasizing Hanani. And Celeste just goes, fuck, the publishing heiress. And she says that she's been trying to lure Yaz's dad to Pierpoint for years, to which Maxim says, my family has been managing his money for generations. So Celeste basically hands her a business card and says, if you ever fancy a change of scenery, I'm on the 12th floor. And Maxim then says to Yaz, now I work for you, because his fund blew up. So now he's going to go work for his dad. So now I work for you, managing your family's money, managing your money. And Yaz then makes this comment how like you're not supposed to sleep with people who work for you. And Maxim's like, are you coming on to me? And then they go and they do sleep together. So
yeah, but it's such a great reminder of how like the water wheel of finance, you can be the client, you can be the coverage. Everyone's always constantly shifting within this hierarchy. So here we've got Yasmin, who thought she was superior to this sex worker, who it turns out is actually very senior within her firm, but within a different division. And that woman now wants something from Yasmin because Yasmin's superior to her because her family comes from wealth. And Maxim, who was the big sexy client that Yasmin was trying to get, now he's got to land Yasmin as the client because he manages her family's money and he's got to keep this business with his family instead of it going to Pierpoint. So like the ways in which these power dynamics are constantly shifting. It's just such a great reminder that like here was Maxim, the big client that Yasmin had to kiss up to, and now he's the hired help as far as she's concerned.
Yeah, that's so true. All right, so now we're back with Harper. So she's trying to get up the courage to talk to Jesse Bloom. She's in a restaurant. She's in a robe. Like I'm not sure why they like went swimming and are in a robe getting food, but whatever. And so Jesse Bloom is sitting at this bar area. She's at a table. She takes her hamburger up to the waiter. Again, it seems like she's trying to do this again to like kind of get the attention of Jesse, and says that she had ordered her hamburger medium and it's well done. And the guy says, you can't have medium in Westminster, which I think is like so strange. Like, and she's like, well, that doesn't make any sense.
It's like a mad cow disease thing. I didn't understand why you couldn't have like a
it's like raw milk and the flu. What's it called? The bird flu? Yeah.
Avian flu, yeah.
That must be it. So Jesse hears this. They start a conversation and he comments that there is something comforting about the dependability of a 4-star chain hotel. And Harper asks if it's because he likes to be anonymous. And he's like, why would I want that? And Harper then says, you know what they say about flying too close to the sun. It gives off a lovely light. And so Jesse adds, sometimes it's nice to just disappear, and shares that he moved here. He has a 19-year-old who refuses to go to college in the US. And so Jesse says that he's stuck in limbo. He's like, what's your excuse? She says she's in purgatory, and his response is, don't wait for others to pray for you. So Jen, I'm going to let my English major.
Well, no, there's a couple of things. So we know that he's there in a fatherly capacity. His son is having trouble acclimating to life in the UK. So he has gone there ostensibly to help him out while he's at college. So this is
I don't think he's at college yet, just because of some plot points later.
Oh, got it. But he's there to help his son is the bottom line.
Yes.
And so it would be strange that his son would be in the UK, like independently, when Jesse Bloom is quite clearly an American. Regardless, he's there in a fatherly capacity to help his son. So remember, we have the title of this episode being Daddy. So I think you're supposed to pay attention when anyone starts talking about their children.
Just made that connection.
Then we had his earlier comment, hell is other people. So talking about, if you guys have ever read Dante's Inferno, the 7 circles of hell, we've got, she's saying, are you stuck in limbo? She's in purgatory. Purgatory, there is a path out of, theoretically, if you get other people to pray for you. So who is going to be the person who rescues Harper from this circle of hell that is purgatory? And he's saying, basically, it needs to be you. So that Harper needs to do something. Just as we know that Harper has been told by New York that she needs to secure production in order to guarantee her spot at work. So all things are pointing to Harper needs to take action with this guy, Jesse Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what I got from all of that scene. And I think that Harper has clearly slipped up a little bit in having this anonymity conversation, because she's revealed, right, if he's just some nobody and she doesn't know who he is, why would she be saying all these things? Mm-hmm. So implying that he's hiding out and trying to stay anonymous. So he now knows that she knows who he is. And you can see that he's just playing this as long as he can to see how long they can keep up this ruse.
Yep. Yeah. So then next scene, we're back with Maxim and Yaz, and the daddy thing comes up again. So they're talking, and he makes a comment. He's like, I don't know why you're not more like this at work. And she's like, what, nude? And he says, no, comfortable, which I do think is so interesting, because she is so comfortable in that one element. And it's something that she obviously lacks when it comes to her work. And he asks her what she thinks of Celeste, and saying that he wants to try to grease the internal wheels if she ever wants to make a move. And she says, I don't need you to daddy me, to which he says, your daddy doesn't even daddy you. Yaz replies, let's not tell our mothers. So that was the first time that I had made note of the daddy comment, but I agree 100% that, like, with Jesse and his son, anyway, I love that you pointed that out.
Well, and I think we've got like the 3 daddies in this episode, if you will. I hate using that term. It sounds super creepy, but we've got Eric with Harper.
Yeah.
We've now got Jesse Bloom with Harper. Mm-hmm. We have Maxim, kind of failed daddy, if you will. I cannot. And then we're going to see, I think, one more emerge as someone who's trying to be a male father figure to Yasmin, which was a wonderful piece of writing. But yeah, so.
All right. So now next scene, we're back with Eric and Harper. So they're in an elevator, and Harper asks what he knows about Jesse Bloom. And so Eric's like, Mr. COVID? He just moved to London. Harper says he did better out of the disaster than anybody else. He bought a wedge of CDS before any real pandemic hysteria. Eric says he went on CNBC, predicted the apocalypse, made the market tank, made his CDS double, sold the CDS, and reinvested 4 yards in blue chip equities at bargain basement prices. That was the Ackman trade. Harper says, no, that was the Bloom trade.
Let's quickly explain this. So for those of you who haven't listened to the big podcast, CDS stands for credit default swaps. They are effectively insurance policies designed to protect bondholders in the event of a default. So if a company, let's say a bank like JP Morgan, borrows money, they need to pay interest on that money and then pay back that money at the end of whatever it is, 5 years, 10 years, whatever. Yeah. If I'm a bondholder and JP Morgan defaults on those obligations, if they don't make an interest payment or they don't pay back their principal, I can lose a lot of money. So I can go out and buy credit default swaps that have basically the opposite payout profile. They pay me if the borrower defaults on their obligations. So if you buy credit default swaps and there's a time of crisis, like the global financial crisis or the early days of the pandemic, when people are worried that companies are going to be in big trouble and can't pay off their debts, the value of those CDS contracts goes up. Owning CDS is a risk off trade, right? So what they're saying here is that Jesse Bloom went out, bought a whole portfolio of effectively these insurance contracts. And then he was an early predictor of the initial panic of the pandemic. So he made a fortune when the value of those contracts went up. Then in response to all of the panic, this huge stimulus got pumped into the system. So he turned around, he invested, when he said 4 yards is slang for billion. So he invested $4 billion in risk assets like equities. And specifically, they said blue chip equities, which I think is just one little very important point, because those big companies, the Amazons, the Apple, whatever, those guys all went to the moon with all of this stimulus being pumped into the economy. It wasn't the small mom and pop businesses, the very small business owners who ultimately ended up suffering so much. So he invested in the biggest companies, the big S&P 500 leaders that all benefited the most from the stimulus to the economy. And so it's unclear if he was the driver of this entire move, which they are making it out to be, because no one person should theoretically have that much influence in the market, but it's not unheard of. I mean, this is certainly something.
GameStop?
Yeah, exactly. This is something that can be very real, especially again with GameStop. Right? It was retail traders who had all that power. Imagine a big institutional name, right? That everyone knows and listens to, getting on CNBC and Bloomberg and talking about how this is the end of the world. They can move markets. So the question is did he do that deliberately or not?
The GameStop guy put a meme out that showed someone leaning forward in a chair last year in 2024, this past year, and it caused the market cap to go through the roof. So absolutely single people can have a huge impact on the markets. And so that's why Eric is like, he has a checkered reputation. So Harper,
which is part of the course for everyone on this show, by the way.
This is true.
We can't have him be like, he's a great guy. We know that if someone's coming onto this show, he's got to have some flaws.
Yeah. So Harper asks, what do you think Bloom paid in premiums for all of it?
Well, I actually really don't like how that question is phrased, because you pay a premium to hold CDS no matter what, right? What she really should have asked was, how much do you think he paid in bid offer to the street to put on a position of that size? Because Eric estimates that Goldman made $30 million off of him, and Harper's like, oh, imagine if that had been you. That's the money that they made, the bid offer spread that they captured, not that it cost him $30 million in premia, because it's not like that's a check being written to the bank. That's right. They capture the bid offer. So I thought that was sloppy writing, and I just wish they'd written again. I love this episode. I don't want to come down hard on them, but like for anyone watching who doesn't understand, they might be misled by that. The actual cost to put on that trade, he would have paid a fortune in carry owning that CDS when nothing was going wrong, and then benefited from it.
Yep, 100%. So Harper says, imagine if that had been you. Eric then says, and I didn't understand this, so I want to see if you know what this means. He says, you know the theory about the giant squid? Harper replies that it exists, and Eric almost looks confused, like he didn't know that it exists, but what the hell does this have to do with?
Okay, well, I know that the title of the next episode is The Giant Squid.
Oh.
Yeah, so I haven't watched it yet.
I don't remember what happens. Okay.
I assume it's like a reference to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or like Moby Dick, or one of these things or whatever. But again, I think a giant squid was like a myth for a long time until they actually found them in the ocean. So, I mean, to me, I was interpreting that as like white whale almost, but I don't know. And the English major falling short here, but I do know that is the title of the next episode. I haven't watched it yet, though.
I have watched it. I just don't remember what in particular happens, but I'm excited.
So we're going to find out what the meaning of the giant squid is. And I should probably go back and read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
All in a week's time. I wouldn't be surprised if Jen does do that, by the way.
No.
So Eric then changes the subject, asks if she's had a chance to make it to their third floor, and she yet again replies, I don't see how that's any of your business, even though like we know why it's his business, but whatever. Okay. So Eric then walks back to his seat. Danny and Rishi are there talking, and Danny says to Rishi, I love Eric. He hired me. The guys who act the most fallible are usually the most fallible. And as Eric walks over, Danny and Rishi turn to him, and Eric says, Guy thinks he's a made man now. Wasn't expecting them to send someone so young. Danny gives Eric a hug. So as we said, we clearly they have some kind of history. And Danny says, again, he said he had hired him. Danny says, love the white hair. It really suits you. As a dig. Eric replies, it wasn't my choice, to which Danny asks, I'm surprised they haven't lovingly bumped you upstairs yet. And this is, by the way, Jen, something that you were talking, I think, in like a couple of episodes about. What was it called? It's about like senior coverage dude who looks over all the people.
Senior relationship management, it's a totally different division within the firm. Yes. But basically, there's many steps before moving off to senior relationship management.
Oh.
So it's very different being an MD who is like the head of the CPS group and an MD who's head of sales. It's very different from being the head of the treasury trading desk and head of trading. Once you get promoted to those head of group titles, you are typically stepping away from the day-to-day P&L of the desk. And that is the kiss of death in many, many ways. It can drastically bump up your compensation, but it also makes you first in line to look like you're not doing anything. Because your whole life you've been producing and putting up hard numbers next to your name, getting put in that corner office where you're taken off the trading floor is, for so many people, it's like, it's so antithetical to what they wanted to do, to just go be a manager. They don't want to manage people. And so that's what Eric's talking about here. Those senior relationship managers, they're not on the trading floor. They are in an office. Yeah.
Yes. Well, that's the whole point. They said that's why they haven't lovingly bumped you upstairs. And that's why he then says a corner office is a coffin. So yes, exactly. So Danny then turns to Harper, introduces himself, and he says his friends call him DVD for short, which is his initials, or Blu-ray. Eric is like to Danny, don't address my people without me here. So there's clearly a power struggle being set up between Eric and DVD. So they start talking about the merger. And Danny says, most consider London an overnight execution desk for the US. And we could say that Brexit makes the Frankfurt office more relevant now. And we also could say that London drinks too much and leaves too early. But no one has made a decision yet. Could be the US, could be London. Robert then asked about their safety, because obviously everyone is sitting there asking like, well, what can I do to keep myself safe? Harper had asked that before. Robert's asking now. Danny says, you pick up the phone and you dial. You need to produce. And he gives us the same advice that Eric has given him before. He then adds, start with the Recan healthcare block this week. Eric says, that's my client. DVD says, glad you got Phelim back. So we know that Phelim is somehow involved in this block trade. In what capacity, we don't know. Eric then adds, telling Harper, we've got breakfast with Phelim tomorrow to make sure he doesn't have any last minute shakiness regarding the block trade. So I want to talk a little bit about what those are. So block trades are something that like people in ECM do all the time. Now, why they're doing it on the CPS desk and why they are talking about it.
Well, I want to be very specific.
No
the
idea.
Second I heard block trade, so block trade in fixed income sales and trading, which has been the space that we have occupied the entire course of this show, is something very, very different than something that would have to do with a company. So the second I heard block trade for this Rycan healthcare, whatever, I was like, we are no longer in fixed income. So yeah, block trades in fixed income have an extremely distinct meaning. That is not this. It would not involve a corporate issuer of anything. So that's why I was like, we're out of the land that I know how to talk about now.
Yeah. Well, no. So again, block trades are something that, like I could say, ECM bankers, equity capital markets, those are the ones that usually do this kind of thing. And the idea is that if you have a company, right, that they've sold public shares, there's, again, shares that are traded in the market, there's only so much in volume that trades on a daily basis. So if you think about, there's something called the average daily trading volume, or ADTV. And so if an investor wants to sell something that's much larger than that, they can't do that without having like a huge impact on the market, on the share price.
So basically what people do in fixed income all day, every day.
Yeah, pretty much.
You need to actually take risk rather than having trade something on an exchange.
Yes. And so what would happen is that, again, if for whatever reason, right, a company wants to sell a chunk of shares, again, like maybe it's like an insider that holds it, or maybe some big investor has this exposure, they want to offload it, but they don't want to move the market. So they go to the bank is an intermediary. Now, sometimes the bank will take what's called that agency risk. So they will actually buy it at a discount from the seller, and then they will like deal with kind of what's happening on the back end. Alternatively, they can look for other institutional investors, similar to what happens if you think about an IPO or a secondary offering. Like they go out, they build the book. And so in the same idea with an IPO, you oftentimes hear people talk about an IPO discount. An IPO stands for initial public offering. So when a company goes public for the first time, they sell shares in the open market. And usually if you buy into the IPO, it should be priced in such a way that the share price goes up. So that's called that IPO discount. And it's kind of similar here, where if you're doing a block trade and you want to sell out a chunk of your shares, you're going to sell it at a discount. So this is
the first thing in equities trading that I've ever fully understood, because it's the only thing in equities trading that looks like how the fixed income market operates.
Well, there we go. So
this
that's
is
exactly what a block trade means.
If you guys want to understand any trading activity in fixed income, it's all that. Everything in fixed income is block trading and equities. So it's, again, new issue discounts on corporate bonds hitting the market. Yeah. It's taking risk from a client and figuring out how you're going to offload it to other people. Like that's exactly what everyone does in fixed income all day. So if you understand what Kristen just said, you now understand what risk taking is like, that they've been doing all along in the show.
Yeah. Well, and then later, actually, so in the background, we hear Eric, who's like on the phone talking to Phelim, and he's explaining to Phelim kind of like how a block trade works, which is more for the viewer, because this guy Phelim, like, he probably should know how to block trade works. But he says, Phelim, you're getting Rycan at a discount. So the upside is we can sell quickly at a premium. And Dueling, so probably some, I don't know, research
house or
analyst house out there, is saying that it's a potential acquisition target. So the idea here, I want to double click on this. Clearly it seems, and again, I could be wrong, but this is how it seems based on just this one interaction. Eric is probably trying to get Phelim to come in as a buyer. Yes. So he's saying you can buy into Rycan at this discount. And the fact that this Rycan Health or whatever is an acquisition target, whenever you have a company that is going to get taken out as an acquisition target, they would sell at a premium. So usually there's a 20 to 40% or control premium. And so if he's able to buy at a discount and then he's able to sell at a premium, like he's just made, I mean, anywhere from like 25 to 50% without having to do anything. So this is what he's trying to say. and trying to make sure that Phelim isn't getting shaky and that he is going to come in as one of the buyers to buy these shares.
Yep.
So he then adds like, when was the last time you lost money trading with me? And Harper then also was like asking again, like, does anyone cover Jesse Bloom? And Danny pipes in saying he has a meeting with BlackRock. And he makes a comment to Eric. He says that Eric looks like George Clooney. And Eric replies, George Clooney looks like me. So
well, no. So what happens is they've had this witty banter, and as DVD is exiting, he goes, oh, the Clooney look looks good on you, or whatever it is. And he's already left. And it takes Eric like a hot second to come up with the comeback. And he goes, Clooney looks like me. And he says it. DVD doesn't hear it. He's already left. It actually looks like Eric has come out on the bottom of this match of wits between him and this new guy on the desk. So Eric is on his back foot with his former mentee, who is running circles around him with the banter, with everybody liking him, all that fun stuff. And when Harper asks if anyone knows like who covers Jesse Bloom, we have Rishi say, you're insane and you'll be taking KFC to Raoul Moat, I don't even know what his name is, who is a fugitive in hiding. So basically saying like you'd have a better chance delivering a takeout order to a fugitive in hiding than you would with this Jesse Bloom guy. And Daniel, this new dude who's popped out of nowhere, says he's uncoverable. Nobody even knows where he is. But Harper does. We know that. So you're starting to see the wheels turn. Again, they're hitting you over the head with it, but you know Harper's going to do something with Jesse.
Oh, 100%. Okay. So next we see Robert call Nicole. Conversation is wildly awkward.
Robert finally gets up the courage to call a client. He calls her up. He calls up Nicole, the woman who molested Harper multiple times in the previous season and with whom things ended terribly. And so we know that no one from Pierpoint has called this woman in like 18 months. So Robert introduces himself and he's super nervous. And she's like, why are you calling me? And he throws out this line that he clearly had heard Clement say in a previous life. He says, I want to talk markets, the old game. Are you feeling bulled up, or is the old bear rousing from her slumber? I mean, I wanted to crawl under my couch hearing that line alone.
It was bad.
It was so bad, but it gets worse. So Nicole goes, why are you talking like a C word? And she gives him a bunch of shit and puts him in his place. And he goes, you're right. That was quite risible. And he's used this like obscure vocab word, which means like laughable or silly. And she's like, what? And he stutteringly repeats that was quite risible. It's so painful. I wanted to tear my hair out. So she says, why don't you call me when you know who you are and who you're talking to?
He adds because he like says his full name, and she's like, you're saying your last name like I know you.
Like it matters to me. Yeah.
Yes.
If Robert wants to stay in this business, he needs to figure out who he is and generally speaking, who he's talking to. He can't just rely on the non-lessons that Clement talked to him about, like throwing some jargon out there and trying to sound like a flashy sales guy. He needs to bring something of value to the table. So
100%.
Nicole is giving him a much needed kind of tough love here.
Yes. All right. So next scene now, Kenny walks onto the desk. So Kenny is back. And everyone is saying how good he looks. He looks like grown a mustache and like a beard. But Yaz is obviously not happy to see him.
So Yaz walks on the floor and her face falls when she hears this very familiar little brogue. He pops up behind her and says, I knew myself only after I destroyed myself, and only in the process of fixing myself did I know who I really was. He doesn't say hi. He doesn't say, hey, I'm back. He spits this platitude out like he'd been rehearsing it for months just to say to her. Yeah. It seems like a quote, by the way. I couldn't find the origin. I did some quick Googling, and it seems like it's like a common thread on recovery blogs. And clearly he thinks this is going to be this moment where he has apologized to Yasmin. And she's like, and, she just looks at him like she is not happy to see him. So that's when he says that line. The blander the platitude, meaning that stupid line I just said, the sharper the truth it reveals, meaning that's how I really feel And then he says, obviously,
Implicit,
I'm
yeah.
sorry is implicit in what I'm saying, but I just wanted to thank you for the small part you played in helping me see who I was.
Yep. And Yaz then says that she doesn't think it's appropriate for him to be saying that to her there. And Kenny replies, well, I can't exactly take you out for a drink, right?
By
So
the way, the irony of her now setting boundaries with him, now that he's apologizing to her, when she never once set a boundary for all the actually inappropriate things he did. What's inappropriate that she's willing to call him out on is him apologizing. I love that.
Yeah. So Kenny then makes kind of a passive aggressive comment, which I don't necessarily think was like passive aggressive.
No, I don't think it was intended to be at all.
It's like well-meaning. Like I actually do think he's now like this like well-meaning person. Yes. So he's like, are you okay? You look like you had a big night out. Help is hard to ask for, but it will change your life. Here for you if you want to talk. And then Venetia
he's
walks
suggesting
up.
that she now has a drug problem, but she needs to go get help.
Yeah. I mean, so it's interesting. Like as we're going to see a little later, I do think it's very interesting that the two men in her life from season 1, Kenny and Robert, are both sober now. Yep. And she is like going.
And she's leaning into buying drugs and hanging out with people she thinks are prostitutes.
I know, right? So I did think that was an interesting like change. It's like a 180, but there's also almost a born again. It's like the born again Christian type where it's you're so
and that happens a lot in AA.
In AA, exactly. And he, I think, embodies that. But I do believe he truly wants to be a better person. And I think he always felt bad about how we treated her. But now he's trying to do the right thing. And she just is like, fuck you. I'm not having any of this bullshit.
100%.
So anyway, Venetia walks up and introduces herself to Kenny.
Kenny's reaction when he meets Venetia, he goes, the brilliant new grad. I've heard loads about you. Yasmin is sitting there hearing this, being like, are you fucking kidding me? I was supposed to be the brilliant new grad when I started, okay? I had to deal with Kenny's bullshit for 6 months, and now he's all kind and warm to this bitch, right? Yeah. So that's when she's like, Venetia, I'm ready to hear your trade idea. Kenny wants to change his ways, and Yasmin is fully embracing
into Kenny.
Her inner Kenny. Exactly. It's brilliant.
Yes, I agree. So she says she's ready to hear Venetia's trade idea, and Venetia's like, well, can we do it in 10 minutes? And obviously, Yaz is just like, no, because this is her power play. So I'm going to let you, Jen, talk a little bit about the exact trade idea, because she talks about selling Brazil.
I'll get into it. So she's going through this hazing ritual. Venetia is like, hey, can we do this in 10? But again, setting a boundary, like, I'm not ready to pitch my trade idea. And I think that Yasmin almost delights a little bit in being like, no, I've caught you off guard. Let's see how badly you screw this up.
Yeah.
Well, Venetia turns around completely calm and confident and says, I like the idea of selling dollar Brazil at these levels. So Jackie chimes in and goes, dollar ladyboy? Why? I have never heard dollar Brazil called dollar ladyboy, so I Googled it, which I now deeply regret, and I need to wipe my search history because there was nothing substantiating that dollar ladyboy is a nickname for dollar Brazil. However, it turned up many other things on my Google search that I rather would not have seen. So anyways, Venetia then goes, it's a stellar catch-up trade if you missed the dollar sell-off. It lagged because the virus ravaged Brazil. The political response was Trump-level appalling. Also, hefty appetite for emerging markets. Basically, all she's saying is that Brazil, this is obviously far enough after COVID where the US has been on this massive upswing. So now she thinks that Brazil is going to be on an upswing and likes expressing that trade by buying its currency. Yes. So Yasmin, who then clearly can't have something good to say about this, says, well, the Pfizer vaccine has to be kept at sub-zero temperatures. It's not a suitable climate for a speedy rollout. And Venetia,
have you heard of
an answer? She goes, well, she's like, yeah, exactly. They're not like distributing this in the jungles of the Amazon. I get like, it's, we're talking about like Sao Paulo and whatever, Rio.
Yeah.
And Venetia goes, well, actually, they're using AstraZeneca. And Yasmin goes, so? Mm-hmm. And Venetia goes, what do you mean so? It's implicit in what I said, right? Like it doesn't have the same limitations as the Pfizer vaccine. And Yasmin snaps at her and goes, nothing's fucking implicit about you actually. So just be clearer next time. And Venetia looks like she's shocked that this woman would speak to her this way and turns around looking like she's going to cry, saying, thank you for your time, and then walks off the desk. And everyone looks at Yasmin like she's just killed a puppy, right?
Yep.
Even Jackie turns to her and goes, Jesus, when did you become the resident pussy breaker in chief? Come on, you're better than that.
Yeah.
I mean, again, if you are a women's studies major, I dare you to write your PhD thesis about this scene. Yasmin doesn't understand why Venetia, who at all surface levels is effectively indistinguishable from her in Yasmin's mind, is being treated like the golden child that she wasn't treated like. So she's repeating the same kind of behavior that was done to her, hoping to prove that this woman is going to crumble under pressure the same way that she did. But I think the tough pill to swallow is that Venetia is objectively better. She's got an answer for everything. She's super poised and confident. And she's legitimately hurt because she performed well and is being treated like shit by this only slightly more senior woman on the desk. And I just think it's so beautifully written because I'm watching this. And again, I still identify here with Yasmin. And I am very guilty of having been Yasmin, of being like, why do you get to decide when we have this conversation? I didn't get to decide.
Yeah.
And Yasmin is reaping, unfortunately, the harvest of not having set boundaries with herself when she was younger and now trying to take it out on this poor woman. So I feel bad for Venetia, yet all of my sympathies are with Yasmin. And it's such a complex scene to watch as a woman. And if you watch this scene and you're just like, Yasmin sucks, why is she being such a bitch? I think you're woefully underestimating how much everyone has been a Yasmin before.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree. I love that whole scene.
This episode is A+.
Yeah. All right. So now next scene, we are at the engagement drinks and Harper is outside talking to Rishi's fiance. And so they are getting along well. Rishi comes up and his fiance is just like, oh, she's wonderful. Like, when are we all having dinner? Rishi says next pandemic. In other words, like never. And as they walk away, Rishi says to his fiance, her name is Diana, he's like, don't fucking talk to her. And she's like, what? She seems like a very lovely girl. And
I will also say this. I worked with Rishi. Rishi seems to me, I know it's very unlikely. I think that Rishi was written about a guy I used to work with. And this is exactly how it was. This like absolute firebrand on the desk, this like loud talking, shit talking trader or whatever, who has just the most erudite, beautiful, charming fiance. And you're like, what are these two people doing together? And she's chummy with everyone on the desk. Everyone knows her. Yeah. She fits right in. Like she's so glamorous or whatever. This is so spot on. It's eerie.
That's so funny. So then at the party, again, Harper is sitting there and she's alone, still trying to type to the same person on Instagram saying you're a fucking coward. And then she sees the little typing ... bubble pop up and then it disappears. So now we're back outside. Yaz is smoking and Robert walks over and Yaz says that she's got a little bit of coke left from the night before from that like crazy party she was at. And Robert's like, no, I'm okay. And he says he feels like he struck out 3 times and is still playing. He says, so forgive me. I'll leave you to it. I'm not making a big statement. I'm just leaving. Have a good night. So back to the point that I mentioned before, like she's not turning into like the people in the prior season, but like,
yes, she is. She is.
Yeah.
She's embracing all of their vices.
Yeah.
She's kind of descending into this, like, I don't care about anyone. I don't care about anything, nihilistic worldview. Mm-hmm. Simultaneously in the background during this scene, we get very loud background dialogue between Rishi and Anraj, who I don't know who he is. I only know thanks to closed captioning. And so Anraj says, I'm doing a rotation from wherever the client who trained with Rishi is. Rishi says, what are you on about? I'm a size lord, you fucking idiot. So by the way, when traders say size, that means like I'm big time, like I'm a big swinging dick. Mm-hmm. And Anraj says, do you think the tone you take with me is grounds for some kind of tribunal? And Rishi says, bullying has been eradicated from the culture. So again, every single time that there's off-screen dialogue with Rishi, I've said this before, it is orienting us in terms of all of the major cultural transformations that have happened between season 1 and season 2 in the real timeline of the real world. Well, now bullying, harassment, everything is like, oh, everyone is like super sensitive about these cultural things.
Right. So Yaz and Harper, because now Harper comes out and they almost like crash into each other. And Harper says, we've entered that phase of the night where everyone is talking at each other or near each other. At least this makes me feel like I'm here. And Harper then tries to essentially make amends with Yaz. And she says, I thought a lot about you while I was out. Yaz replies, yeah, I've been busy and people have moved on. And Harper replies, great. My bad for assuming you thought about anybody other than yourself. And Yaz is like really pissed. Again, I was so on Harper's side here. Like she's trying to make freaking nice, but I feel like to your point, Yaz is in this like nihilistic, just fuck everything. She's in a terrible mood. And so she just wants nothing. But I think that, again, Harper was hurt. So she's saying, sorry, I thought you actually gave a shit about anybody other than yourself.
Well, I also think like the beginning of their conversation was super neutral, but there were dual meanings to what they both said, because Harper says, at least this makes me feel like I'm here. Obviously, one, meaning back at the office, back with the group, part of the whole mix. But also, I think like existentially, because we know that her mental health has been so bad. I do think it's like that she's here, right? That she's present and living and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Yasmin says, yeah, well, for better or worse, we're here. And I think same as above, we're back in the office, but also we're here in our relationship in this bad place, right? I think that's what she's talking about, because I think her relationship with Harper is always top of mind for her.
Yeah.
And so I don't think Yasmin entered that conversation with bad intent whatsoever. I think she was just like super neutral. And I think it is still hurtful for her. And I don't think she said anything that at face value Harper should have taken such offense to.
Although, yeah, I think it depends. It's like one of those things where if like you're sensitive and someone like looks at you funny, but I sort of was on Harper's side, but that's interesting that you kind of
I was on
differently.
Yasmin's side in this conversation.
Oh,
I was like, Harper's been nothing but a raging bitch to her. Now she wants to make amends without actually ever saying sorry. And now the second Yasmin says something that I think is even neutral, Harper jumps down her throat and says basically, no, never mind. I was wrong about you. You're a selfish bitch.
Well, I think it was because she said people have moved on, meaning like I've moved on and I haven't thought about you at all. I think that was, it's like back to like implicit, right? Where like that word was thrown out, but like that was kind of the implicit meaning that I had taken, which is why I would have taken it that way.
Well, no, I think that meaning could be there, that we've all moved on, but meaning I thought like Yasmin were being like, we've all moved on. Like, we're not living in the past and like these terrible events that happened. Again, we're here in our relationship, but like, let's not rehash what went down.
So she says, my bad for assuming you thought about anybody other than yourself. Yaz is pissed, laughs like she can't believe what Harper just said, and then replies, you really needed to say that, didn't you? Frankly, Harper, I don't have the energy to listen to you or you're fucking whining. You're agonizing. You are a black hole. I'm over it. And Harper is just like, what? And Yaz says, there are radiators and there are drains. Harper says, you're saying this to me? Yaz, literally everything you have taken from somebody else. None of it belongs to you. Yaz walks away and says, good luck finding someone to love you. And Harper then connects with Robert and they both go and get into.
Because she's fucking wasted. Harper is wasted. And that's why she's taking offense at every single thing that Yasmin says, I think, why she's interpreting it through that lens. And I think Yasmin, I thought everything Yasmin said was perfectly well rationalized. And I think Harper is, I think she sucks. Like, again, she couldn't stand the idea of Yasmin being on her desk. She couldn't stand the idea of anyone succeeding except for her. She has been a terrible friend to Yasmin. And yes, there was competition between the two of them when it came to Robert, but I think Yasmin was genuinely happy for her more often than not. And I don't think Harper has ever once been genuinely happy for Yasmin. I think Harper is the more toxic friend in the friendship. I think Harper sucks in this scene. She is drunk as hell. And she has no idea how to re-enter society. And Yasmin is like, why should I waste any more energy on you? I was willing to come to this conversation and stand here and talk to you, and all you do is insult me. Why should I be a party to this? I totally agree with Yasmin.
Yeah. I just think that Harper initially came into this wanting to be like, I think about you a lot. And it's like, I've moved on. So I see how that was hurtful and why she kind of went there. But I mean, it goes back to this view that she has that we talked about in the last episode, that whatever Yasmin has is because she's taken it from someone else, which is like absolutely not true. So yes, I agree with what you said. It was just from the where my sympathies lie. I was like, oh, she wanted to be friends. And I also wanted them to like become friends again. So I'm like annoyed that it turned south, and I blamed it more on Yaz than Harper.
Interesting. I blame Harper.
Yeah.
But I can see both sides of it, obviously.
Yeah. So they go back to the hotel. Robert takes Harper back because she's wasted. And he walks her through the hotel. Jesse's there again in his robe. Like, they're always in their freaking robes, but whatever. So he's there in his robe. Robert is trying to get her home. And Harper says, put me to bed, Daddy. Again, Daddy comes up. And Jesse says, just so you know, I'm right here. And Robert replies, fuck off, I'm her mate. He's
seeing this because he doesn't know that Robert isn't trying to take advantage of 100%. Harper. So he's trying to be Harper's ally. And I think 100%. That really speaks to the more fatherly instinct of Jesse, right? Like, hey, don't mess with this girl, you know, like I'm looking out for her. And Robert doesn't know who he is.
Right. He's like, you're this random dude and I'm literally her friend. I'm trying to make sure she gets back safe. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they basically go to kiss each other and he realizes that like she's way too drunk. And so instead of doing anything, he tries to help her take her clothes off, like get into bed and just go to bed. Harper keeps trying to come on to him, but clearly he doesn't want to take advantage of her. And she's pissed and she's just saying the meanest things that can like come to her mind. Like, you're a little
because
bitch.
this
What
is
kind of man are
Harper's
you?
like default thing. Again,
Yeah.
the second anything doesn't go her way, she lashes out at people. The second Yasmin doesn't forgive her instantaneously, she says incredibly hurtful shit. Robert's rejecting her because she's obviously
Wasted.
not able to consent to whatever it is that they do. And she's all of a sudden giving him these low blows about his manhood and his sexual performance. And this is how we find out indirectly, by the way, that they've been sleeping together this whole time.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
I was like, what? Oh,
Yep.
okay. Way to throw that in, right?
Yep. So the next morning she wakes up and Robert had left a note which reads, "Hotel life equals not for you. You're taking our spare room, Rob."
By the way,
Thank
I love that
God.
Robert and Gus are living in a 3-bedroom apartment. Like, how nice.
I know. Yeah.
How do you guys afford this when Gus is out of that's what I'm saying. It's a 2-bedroom apartment for each of them. So they have an extra room that they're not using and Gus isn't working. So like, how are we paying for this apartment?
Gus is rich though, I think.
I guess so, yeah.
Probably has a trust fund. So now next scene, we see Harper running into Jesse in the lobby and he asks how she's feeling. And she's like, "I'm great." And he's like, "Let's cut the shit. You've known who I am the whole time." And she says, "You were a top hit," before adding, like, "Harper Stern, nice to meet you. I work in cross-product sales at PurePoint. I work for Eric Tao." And Jesse's like, "I love how you say that. Like, I'm supposed to know who that is." Kind of reminiscent of when Robert's like, "This is my name and here's my last name." And Nicole's like, "I love how you act like I'm supposed to know who you are." So he says, "The only famous salesperson I knew was Willie Loman, who
The
I
only famous
Googled."
salesman.
Yeah, from like Death of a Salesman. I don't know anything about that show, that play, whatever it is. That was my Google search. Do you know? You probably do.
Yes, Death
You're
of
the
a
person.
Salesman is one of the most famous plays. It's a tragedy. But again, he's just saying basically
Like, this is a famous salesman.
like as a joke, right? Is someone
yeah.
who is not an actual Bond salesman. And also, I think it is good insight into the fact that in these little worlds that you get in your bubble, you think you work with these big timey people and you don't realize that there are such bigger spheres in which some of these people operate. I remember feeling like all the time, like, oh, I work for so-and-so. And you go out and meet a client and they'd be like, who? And you're like, oh my God, you don't know this person. They're a living legend, blah, 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 blah. It's like, in your small little world they are. But like, no one knows who they are.
So Jesse then gets like a phone notification, says, "I'm off to a Q&A, bulge bracket town hall on the trading landscape post-pandemic." Harper says, "Living us, we are optimistic for equity investments, risk assets in the global economy." To which Jesse says, "Useless." So he says he wants to wear a t-shirt that says past performance does not guarantee future results.
It's a disclaimer, but that's obviously a great one-liner. I think that's funny.
Yeah. So Harper tells him that she's going to this client breakfast, otherwise she would be there. And as he's leaving, Harper asks, "When you went on TV, were you genuinely worried about the pandemic, or were you just," and he says, "talking my book?" She replies, "Flying too close to the sun." He says, "Imagine if I ever told some salesperson the answer to that." Harper then asks, "Do you have sales coverage in London?" Like she's shooting her shot. Jesse replies, "If you decide to skip breakfast, you know where I am." And as Jesse walks out, Harper gets up and asks, "Have you ever heard the joke? Two lonely Americans meet in a bar." Jesse replies, "I'm watching you." So now next scene, we're outside and we see Kenny and Venetia talking, and he's being like so like mentory.
They're like coming back from coffee. Like, oh, let's get off the desk and like talk about your performance and how we're going to work together. You can totally see that.
So Kenny walks up to Yaz and says, "I heard about Silver Kite. It's always hard losing a client when you have a personal relationship. We'll find a way to cover the shortfall in commission. Keep New York at bay. I know you don't need my help, but I have a ton of work with my reintegration and I could use help with my accounts. I've actually got a few nerpy ones. Am I using that right? Anyway, a life raft if you need it." And as he walks away, Yaz takes out Celeste's business card as like we just like, Kenny's being so nice. And she's
being so nice. He's being the manager she always needed and wanted him to be. He's finally being it. But she has just been so thoroughly broken by the system that spat her out as this.
Yeah.
She's like, fuck this bullshit. I don't want to come help you with your accounts. I'm supposed to be big time by now. So I'm going to go somewhere where they're going to treat me like I'm big time. And so she's clearly thinking about bailing on this bullshit FX desk that is now rewarding this other woman who's like everything Yasmin should have been.
Yep. So back inside, now we see Robert looking down at the trading floor, and he decides he's going to try Nicole again. I actually loved, he's so cute.
I just love Robert's little journey that we've seen. So he is now getting up the guts, right? He's just been told by Harper, with whom he's apparently sleeping, that like he's not a man. He can't perform. Like he's got all these things. He's been so beaten down. And he finally gets up the guts to call Nicole again, who brutally rebuffed him during his first attempt. And so she picks up. He's super nervous, but he kind of cops to it. And he says, okay, this is my last ditch attempt to actually do my job, which apparently, to my terror, involves making more than one outgoing call a day to people who either definitely know more than me or have just been bred to think they know more than me. And this vulnerability and disarming act works on Nicole. Because just think about it, right? You're one of these hedge fund managers. You have salespeople calling you all day, being like, bullish or bearish, blah, 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 right? Robert's like, I'm laying myself at your mercy. And Nicole, the last time she interacted with anyone from Peerpoint, it was these crazy toxic interactions with Harper, Daria, whatever, with like the molestation and blah, 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 blah. She kind of wants someone to treat her like she's a big deal and mean it. And Robert means it. He's like, oh my God, I really need you to help save my career. And she takes pity on him. And she goes, okay, well, that's a start, right? And is kind of willing to take a shot on him. So I'm like so happy for Robert in this moment. I mean, Nicole is an incredibly problematic character. So I'm not so sure that it's great that he's finally getting up the guts to do this with Nicole. I wish it was with someone who didn't have a history of sexually attacking their sales coverage. But like, I'm very happy for Robert that he's going out on a limb and doing this.
Yeah. So then in the next scene, we see Yaz walk up to the PWM floor. So floor number 12, whatever.
Oh my God. And by the way, this reminded me so much of Grey's Anatomy. Like if you guys ever watch Grey's, they're always like on the ER, like in the emergency room and like the ICU and like the surgery and everything's like, blood and guts flying everywhere and it's all crazy. And then in one episode, they go up to dermatology and it's like, do you want to sit on a couch? Would you like some cucumber water? Like whatever. Mm-hmm. So like, that's what PWM looks like. It's this gorgeous office that's like, beautifully decorated. It looks like the waiting room of some like beautiful hotel lobby or something like that. I just love that contrast because it's so true.
Yep. So then after that, we see Eric and Phelim getting breakfast together. Phelim just asks, is she usually late? Because we know that Harper was supposed to have this breakfast meeting. And Eric says, nope, things happen. And so where is Harper? Well, we see her sitting up in the audience watching Jesse Bloom's Q&A. So we know that she has made her choice about what to do. But like, I will say, like, she should have texted Eric and said, hey, I had the chance to try to land Jesse Bloom. You know what I mean? Like, she didn't have to just not show up. Like
I'm going after a big fish. Like cover me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and all she's done is made Eric look bad in front of her. I totally agree. I cannot stand Harper. It's so unnecessary. She is most selfish. I guess you don't have to be so terrible.
This is such an easy fix. I mean, again, hello, meet the telephone. Like,
yes.
This is 100%. Not like
instead
the
of sending creepy Instagram text messages to this random person who may or may not be your brother, send your boss a message and be like, dude, and be like, I'm going in, cover me.
Yeah.
Like,
And like, he probably would have been like, team. Great, go do that. Yes. Or I need you because this whole thing with Phelim is very shaky and he's a huge freaking client. So like, yeah.
The only reason for her to not do that is because she has Eric's territorial mindset so deeply ingrained in her that she doesn't want to confess to Eric that she's going after Jesse Bloom until she has him, because if she's going after him and he refuses to split the sales credits for Phelim with her and acknowledge her contribution there, what's the likelihood that he's going to be willing to be like, Jesse Bloom's your account and not mine, right? He's probably going to take that account for himself. So she's doing the same secretive, territorial, siloed bullshit that Eric does, which doesn't help the team. She's hurt Eric. And also, listen, as someone who struggles with punctuality, it's terrible. I'm very bad at it. But like, we know that Phelim's 10 minutes early to every meeting too. So not only is it bad that she's late, like not being early with Phelim is like the kiss of death. Yeah. So it's extra bad because we know this is a client for whom that's everything. And Eric has worked so hard to win Fallon back after whatever it was that blew up the relationship. Harper has been instrumental to that. So she's just blowing up her own efforts too, because she hasn't been given credit for them because Eric hasn't split it. So like, this is a big FU for not splitting the sales credits. I think that's implicit there as well.
Yep. So that was season 2, episode 1. And that is a wrap. All right. Really quickly, who are we bullish and who are we bearish on?
As far as liking their character and liking their direction, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I'm bullish on Kenny.
Yay. Yeah. I agree with that.
Kenny has been redeemed.
Yep.
I'm sorry. I don't like Harper at all in the last 2/3 of this episode. I'm really not a fan of her, but I feel like she's doing the right things for her career at the expense of all of her personal relationships. So I'm bullish on her career, bearish on her personal relationships.
Yeah. I'm going to say I'm bullish on Robert. He finally has gotten the courage. We'll see how that goes. And then I'm going to agree with you, bearish on, honestly, Yaz and Harper. Like Yaz is, she does seem a little self-destructive-y this
She
season.
seems lost.
So yeah, she seems lost. And yeah. So thank you guys. I am really happy that I was able to pull through. I did take a Tylenol about halfway through. But yay. So we will be back again next week. It would mean so much to us if you would leave us a written 5-star review. It helps us grow in the rankings. And anything else, Jen?
No, share the show with a friend. We're so excited to be here. I'm so excited. Season 2 already is like light years ahead of where we ended the last 2 episodes of season 1. I am pumped for what's coming up.
Yay. All right. So we will see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.